All right. The recording should be kicking in.
Looks like it.
Good. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us tonight for the St. Louis.NET Meetup. And right now up on the screen, we have our agenda. Between 5:30 and 6, we ought to think of something that we could do during that time. I don't know, maybe Scott could show us some dance moves or something like that. I don't know, since he likes being on camera. We'll cover some announcements. We're going to have a lightning talk with Chau about his open source project, Object Mapper for TypeScript. I'm looking forward to that one. And then we're going to get into the Microsoft Power Platform. So a couple other announcements for what's coming up in the future meetups next month. Kevin, I hope you attend this meetup next month because we're going to have a unique guest. It's not going to be a technical talk. Actually, prior to the main talk, I'm going to give a kind of a lightning talk on knob commerce and some technical aspects. But the main talk is from Jonathan Stark, and he wrote the book, Why Hourly Billing is Nuts. And anyway, he's kind of a go-to guy for me, actually, on a lot of this consulting stuff. So whether you're a consultant, full-time employee, I really enjoy Jonathan's perspectives, and I hope you will too next month. After that, in September, we're going to have Cameron Presley giving us a talk on learning functional programming through construction. That should be a pretty good one. I believe the lightning talk space is open. No, Clint, you're doing a lightning talk that month. So join us for that. After that, in October, Sarah Ford's going to do a talk for us. I know the lightning talk is open for that, but that should be a pretty good one. She has a lot of good takeaways for working with Git. And the last thing I want to mention is that there's a lot of other meetups around the country that, of course, are going virtual. And even in town, there is the STL Full Stack Meetup, and they have a virtual talk on Blazor. So it might be worth checking out in the middle of August. So definitely search meetup.com for all the different .NET meetups because there's a lot of good talks going on out there that you can just get to for free. So with that, Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to you if you want to share your screen. I'm going to stop sharing mine and we'll go from there. Oh, and also during the talk, it's good for everybody to have their video turned off. Actually, it's your choice really if you have the video turned off or on. As for your microphones, we do want you to have yourself muted though. Thanks.
And I don't know that I need to share my screen before Chau gets going here. If I could just have a few minutes of introduction for myself now and for Chau. Just to reiterate, if you can mute your audio during all of the talks tonight. And what I found, I've been doing a lot of these Teams meetups. They've actually worked very well. Kind of getting used to it and kind of know what works and what doesn't. So some of you have already been using the chat here. If you don't know how to do that, hover your mouse over or your iPad or whatever. There's a little chat window and it's got a meeting chat. If you have a question while anyone is speaking, drop it in there. It's a little easier when we're all remote, especially for a large group. For us, or there's a few of my team that are going to be kind of watching that tonight. And if someone else is talking, I'll be doing it. If I'm talking, they'll be doing it. So drop your question in there and we'll make sure we get it answered. So just a little bit more of a streamlined way to make this all happen. I thank you guys all for coming, and there's going to be a lot of information shared tonight. Chau is going to kick off. Chau, when I wanted to introduce Chau as well, Chau is also an ArchitectNow employee, so I've been encouraging him to brag about what he does, mostly on the side and his open source contributions. He is one of the core team members on the Nest.js project. He just got that last week, so I want to say congratulations to Chau. And a year or two ago, I got big into a server-side API platform on the Node. So I know we're talking to the .NET user group, but I got big into this. Me and Chau, him maybe a little bit before me, but we built a lot of tools both in the .NET infrastructure, server-side, C#, .NET Core. We also use Node and Nest.js and TypeScript on the server for some of our projects. And a couple years ago, I myself was hung up trying to do something in a different infrastructure than I was used to, which is Node. I was looking for an Automapper to convert data types of one structure to another very quickly, kind of like Jimmy Bogard does if you've ever used Automapper. And Chau ran with that so much, he couldn't find one. He couldn't find a way for it to work, and he ended up taking over and becoming one of the smartest TypeScript people I've ever met. And now he's got 23,000 downloads of the Automapper that he wrote in TypeScript and manages the open source thing. So I can't wait to hear what he has to say about that. We do a lot of the stuff you're going to see tonight, not only TypeScript and Node and .NET. So my brief non-salesy introduction to ArchitectNow is we're going to sprinkle a lot of knowledge across a lot of stuff, and some of it tonight is not going to be the stereotypical ArchitectNow, let's go code Angular, C# demo. It's more of a no code, low code thing, and we'll talk more about that later. But we're having a giveaway. I mentioned if you just joined that if you stick around or you see in the chat window here, there is a link. I will share the link a number of times tonight. If you want to share your email with us and your name, we will enter you into a drawing to win some IoT dev kits in the Azure space. We've been giving them away recently, and they're actually very cool, and we've had very good feedback. I stay in touch with a lot of the winners and brainstorm with them, and we chat back and forth as to what they're using it for, and they keep me in the loop. So I'm giving more of those out tonight. So please make sure you get signed up. If you didn't see the link in the chat message above, we'll make sure that comes out there. So the schedule for tonight, Chau's going to share with you his open source project, and then we're going to talk Power Platform and all kinds of various things and capabilities that go into that. We will try to get through it as quickly as possible, but I appreciate you guys all joining. And any questions of me before we turn it over to Chau? Anything that you want to know about agenda, timing, things of that nature? Nothing? Perfect. Mr. Chau, share your screen. Show us what you can do.
Let me share my screen here. Hopefully I can share screen too. Right, you guys see my screen?
We sure can.
All right, so hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. Just like Kevin mentioned, my name is Chau. I'm working for ArchitectNow as an engineer. My lightning talk today is on my Automapper library for TypeScript. So most of you probably are familiar with the Automapper.net by Jimmy. For those who don't, Automapper is an object-to-object mapper by convention. So with the limited time, I've prepared some demos for some basic use cases, and then I'll talk about how and why I create the library, as well as how I maintain it. And then if the time allows, we have some Q&As. So what you're looking at is the homepage of the documentations of the Automapper, of the library. So if you want, you can just go read on why, my use case, and blah, 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 problem with TypeScript. So let's just kick off with some demo. So Automapper, you have two classes. One is a source model, and the other one is the destination model. So here I just have a user and a user VM. On the user, you have the password, and on the user VM, which is the view model, you don't want to expose the password. So you want to return this to the client without a password. So in Node.js or in the TypeScript word, you can just return an object, or you can just do some object assigning from the user entity to that object, and then you return it. For our use case, because we use Automapper a lot in .NET projects, so we couldn't live without one. So I create one, which you can just start by. So the library exposes a singleton of the mapper, which is an instance of the Automapper class, which you could show, what I can show you in the next demo. First of all, you have two classes, and you can just create map, and you pass in the source and the destination. And assuming this is what you get from fetching a user, and then you can just do a mapper.map, and you pass in that object, the source object, and the destination you want, and you will get an instance of the destination. So I'm gonna run that real quick here. So you can see right here, this is my user, this is my source object, and this is my user VM, which has been mapped by the Automapper. Again, by convention means you don't have to do anything extra if you construct your classes in a conventional way, which is like first name, last name, email. So properties, same property names and stuff like that. So that's the most basic demo that I can show with the Automapper. Actually, let me stop and rerun. So I'm going to stop this one. Now I'm going to check out the next demo. For this one, I want to demo the reverse map functionality. So I have reverse map, and reverse mapping in TypeScript is a little bit tricky because the reflection capability is not that great. But I make do. Or again, I'm gonna run this demo. So as you can see right here, I have the VM as the last demo. This is my map user. I'm gonna step over, which if I see, I actually just resume program and just console log. So I console log the mapped user here. You can see that I can map from user to user VM and from user VM back to user. There are some limits regarding reverse mapping, which I cannot go into detail given the time limit. So right, that's reverse mapping. Next, I want to show map from. So with the Automapper in .NET, you have the expression. So on the expression, you will have all kind of I would call those member map functions. So in TypeScript, because we have the tree checking ability, so I make those into a peer function. So you can just use it. If you don't use it, the bundle like Webpack or Rollup or whatever you have will not include those in the bundle size. So here the API is almost identical to the Automapper on .NET. So you have create map, and then after that you have for member. And over here, because as I said, this is TypeScript, the typing definition for this library is what took me the most time. So here I can TypeScript knows that I'm mapping to the destination of user VM. So here I can have all full intelligence to all the properties on the user VM. So I can just map to first, and then I map from source of first name over here as well. So it knows that I'm mapping from the source user model. So it gives me the intelligence of all the properties on the user. So over here, there's a for member full name. Now I'm gonna map this real quick. So that's the VM. So right there, so you can see that it mapped successfully. And also reverse map also work with map from. Let me see if I have step over. Yep. So if I step over, here's my mapped user. You can see that first has been mapped back to first name. Same with last. The password is null because I ignore it. So that's map from. Another basic demo of one very common use case is map from. Next, I have, so this one is flattening. So again, flattening in TypeScript is tricky, but I try to make it work at the basic level. So here on the user, you have the address nested class, and on the address you have street, city, and state. And on a user VM, you can construct the property like in a conventional way that it will. This is address street, and then address city, address state. These three properties will be mapped mapped automatically by flattening from the address class on the user. As you can see, my mapping configuration doesn't have anything to do with the address street, city, or state, but it will map from the address class. VM. So you can see that state, city, and street, which is mapped from street, city, and state. So again, reverse mapping. So the address is an object. So I have to use map from to map it back from that. So it doesn't have any retain the mapping, the mapping configuration, the flattening for reverse mapping. So that's one limit. Again, that's flattening. 5. All right, so this one is a bunch of stuff, which is, so now I have address and address view model. I have converter, so you can use convert using, which I demoed down here. I also have the profile concept, so you can separate the concern of configure your mapping configuration out to separate file and use the profile approach. And the profile will receive the map instance in the constructor, so you can create map from the inside profile. So here I create map from address to address VM, and for member on the address VM, I have the formatted address. Here I just use convert using, and I pass in an instance of the converter, which will return me the concatenation of street, city, and state. On the user, I have address still, and on user VM, I have address VM. Again, here I can just remove the VM part of the address on the user VM and completely remove this configuration for that address VM. Automapper, TypeScript will automatically pick that up and try to map from address to address VM, because it finds that on the source model, there's an address with the class of address. So let's just demo that real quick here. So now that's my VM. You can see that address, it will map automatically from address to address VM. And here's my formatted address, street, city, and comma state. So let's see if I can have the mapped user. So mapped user knows to reverse map from address VM to address. So there's that, the nested model. And again, if you have like a different property for the view model, then you have to use the, just put it back real quick. There we go. And you will have to use the map width map function that tells Automapper, hey, I want to map this property with the destination and use the value of address from the source model. And if I run this right now, I will get the address VM map from the address. So here we go, formatted address. So that's the demo for profile, converter, and nested objects. I think I have one last one, which is 6. So the last one is I want to show the naming convention. So currently I have supported for 3 naming conventions: camel case, Pascal case, and snake case. Here I'm going to demo the snake case. So here my user VM, my view model, has a snake case convention. So when you create a map, you can just say, hey, my destination member naming convention is a snake case naming convention, and that's all you have to do. Everything else is the same. Now you can just map. There we go. So, and as you can see, these right here is flattening. So flattening works with naming conventions as well. You can also provide the naming convention globally by using mapper.with global settings. Here you can provide the destination naming convention and source naming convention globally, so that you don't have to do on the mapping configuration level. And that pretty much concludes my my demo. So I'm working on a side project which has a lot more going on, and I have to use like Automapper and everything. So if you're interested, just reach out to me. I can just walk you through all the use cases that I can come up with. All right, so that concludes my demo. How much time do I have? How much time do I have left, Kevin?
You got time. Go. Explain
how
it's open source and how that goes.
Yep. So again, why Automapper for TypeScript? As Kevin said, I couldn't find one that is good enough or even maintained. So I ended up just create one myself. Here in the documentations, I list 5 alternatives that I found. You can read over the documentations, and here's my reasoning for not using this particular one. And for the open source, how I maintain it is basically I try to maintain a 99% to 100% unit test. So you can actually read through my unit test if you want to know all use cases that I cover. Apparently, I have one issue, which I'm going to take time working on. And I have Travis. I use Travis CI for the CI/CD part of thing. I also use semantic release, which will automatically analyze the commit message. So you can see this commit message is the conventional commit with the fix or docs or feature, stuff like that. And semantic release will analyze these and determine if it needs to release a new version or a new patch version or a new minor version or a new major version. So that's how I maintain it. So every time I work on something, I can either create a branch or just push directly to master. So every push to master will kick off this build, and this build will run deploy the API reference, deploy the docs, which is this one right here. It will run npm release, and it will run produce coverage. Produce coverage actually covered by coverors.io. So right here you can see that mapper has 100%, and using coverors, I have a nice little badge right here to say 100%, and that's pretty much it. That's how I maintain this project by myself for now. Again, it's just me, so I haven't run into a lot of use cases. But if again more usage, more issues, then I can definitely improve this or even ask for contributors and stuff like that. Right. So that's it. That's all I have.
And for those of you that have never even seen what an Automapper is used for, we use it I mean, it could be used for any time you need to convert the structure of one object to another, whether the properties are named the same or not. But in our world, both in .NET and with Chau's library, it takes view models. Well, it takes our data entities that we get out of databases, whether it's Mongo, SQL, or otherwise. We do not directly return those entities back to the client in a JSON format. Instead, we map them to potentially a slightly simplified or a different format for various reasons, so that we can control that mapping. And that's what goes down. If someone calls an API and they say, here's some input, give me a list of 50 people, they don't get the person object out of the database. They get a person VM object that might have a different structure. That mapper that he has, or that we use in .NET with Automapper.net, is the library in those profiles that transform those objects. So, and before we started, any questions on Automapper, TypeScript from anybody? My recommendation to everybody is, if you have a problem that you can solve, we live in an open source world, so I couldn't be prouder of Chau solving a problem and sharing it with everybody. And now all the people that are using it and plugging it in, it plugs right into Nest, it plugs in anywhere. If you're not, I couldn't really say how many of you use TypeScript on a day-to-day basis, but if I were a betting man, I don't know the actual statistics at ArchitectNow. While we're a big .NET shop, we do a significant amount of C# on the back end of .NET Core. Our front end is heavily Angular, some React, so I'm guessing over half, 60% of our code, maybe 70% of the overall code that we write on a daily basis is in TypeScript. So we live in a TypeScript world, so that's a tool that fits in that TypeScript world. Our front end, all of our user interfaces are in TypeScript, and then our back end is in .NET. So there's a parity between the data that comes from C# down to TypeScript. So. All right, you hear Mr. Don Jacobsmeyer?
Yep.
All right. So, and if you have, I don't know how much Chau shared his information, but if you have any questions on his thing, if you can't get a hold of him directly, reach out to me. I'm going to share my contact information in a minute. I know where he works, so I can get a hold of him. So if you're interested in, if you have questions on TypeScript or anything else, writing one of us will get you in touch with the other person. Hold on one second. I'm getting ready to share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Big and red.
Yes.
All right. Perfect. As I mentioned earlier, this is not your traditional. So what you just saw from Chau, we do a lot of, those of you that have seen me speak or seen someone from ArchitectNow, we're developers. My history individually in all my jobs as a business owner or as just a developer for someone else's business, I'm a coder. I know a lot about C#. I used to know more about C# anymore. It seems like the world is running faster than I am. I know a lot about .NET, know a lot about Azure, know a lot about a lot of things. And I used to think I knew a lot. Now I know a little about a lot of things, but it is what it is. Today, we're going to talk about something maybe a little outside the norm, but has become a huge part of what we do. It's growing in what we do. Our goal tonight is to sprinkle a lot of knowledge across a lot of little things and open your eyes to maybe what's possible that some of you may not know exists. Some of you may do this every day. I don't really know that. The reality is, and this is a mistake that I've made personally, and I want to keep other people from making the same mistake. When you have a hammer, everything's a nail. I know that seems cliche, but if you're good at programming .NET on the server and you're good at programming Angular and your boss or your peers or somebody comes to you with a technical problem, you tend to just want to custom write a solution to solve that problem. I can code it and I can make it, I can fix the problem or I'll automate that process. I'm going to open up Visual Studio or I'm going to open up whatever tool I do and I'm going to write code. And the more code I write, the more I can solve that problem. And writing software is a science and it's an art. Microsoft's Power Platform is relatively new. I'm going to show you a bunch of pieces. Don and I we've got demos lined up tonight. It does not say that you're obsolete as a developer. We are not. We integrate with these things all the time. They are just different tools in a tool belt that when a customer comes to us, we say, well, I'm not going to waste our time writing that because I can do that in a day. And then this other thing, if it really has a need, we're going to go code this in C# over here. So this is a set of tools and technologies and concepts that Microsoft has released called Microsoft Power Platform. We have an hour and a half tonight. We're going to run through a lot of things very quickly. Some things are not going to get the service that they maybe do. We're going to demo a lot. Our goal is to show this maybe with a little bit of a developer slant, what we found, what we like, what we thought about it, because we had experience. Our background was Axe. We knew Visual Studio. We knew SQL Server. We did things one way. I also lived through the light switch days. I lived through the Silverlight days. I've lived through a number of the whole low code, no code type solutions that various vendors have provided. And they've had, some of them had great ideas. Some of them had, mediocre implementations. There's a lot of arguments to be made why one or the other didn't make it very far. We're pretty excited about Power Platform. They've done it differently. They've learned a lot. So hopefully at the end of the day, if there's anything else that could happen in the next hour and a half for those of you that you're listening in and watching wherever you may be, I hope you think, wow, this could solve. I'm not going to say it solves all your problems by any means. It's meant, Microsoft has a target audience. And if what you do fits in that target audience, this could be a significant benefit to your company, to what you do on a day-to-day basis. It's not going to, it's not the square peg that fits in every square hole. But there is a lot here in that we're going to go through. We do have a PowerPoint. We have some things to talk about. We're not going to belabor the PowerPoint, but contact information. I always miss this and forget about this, so I did want to include it up front. If we run through stuff tonight and you're unfamiliar, we went too fast, or you had a different take on something, please reach out to us. That's our contact information, Twitter, website. Don't hesitate. I say this every time I talk, or sometimes I forget, but I try to respond to everything I get. please reach out. Please share your thoughts. Please ask questions. I may not be the expert that knows everything like I used to think I was, but my goal in life right now is to know the people that do. So that's where I'm at in my career. And like I said, as we go, if there are questions or something you want, please use the Microsoft Teams messaging and just pop your question in there. We might not answer it immediately, but we will, watch that and try to get back to that and make sure we do what we can to answer whatever needs answered. All right, diving in. And like I said, we're sprinkling a lot of information. At the end of tonight, my expectation is not that you're going to sit down and just build all of your apps. I want you to realize that even if it's not by the end of the night that you could leverage all these tools, if you sat down and watched a video or two, it could be by tomorrow night that you do. I'm not, we're not teaching you new programming language. We're not teaching you or expecting you to learn. It's not like saying if you've never programmed in Angular, now you're going to go learn web development and HTML and CSS and TypeScript and all these things, and you're going to become an Angular development. That's a bigger thing to bite off. We do a ton of it, so I'm not saying it's difficult. That kind of, in terms of web and single page apps, that is what we do. What we're finding is we need to do that less because a lot of the time, well, not a lot of time, but there are definitely situations where a customer comes to us with the need and we think, man, we could hand code this, but it could take us a month to do a full agile development process. All you need is me to spin up a Power App, maybe a Power Automate, a report in Power BI. The things we're going to talk about, we might be done in 3 days. So customer might get more value than we could have possibly written them, custom written an application over the course of months. So this isn't to say that custom code is bad. It's basically tonight, if you leave with nothing else, it's to say that it's not always needed. There are other alternatives. And these alternatives are what we're talking about here today. And Microsoft calls some of what they are releasing the Power Platform. If you look at what's up on your screen right now, that Power Platform consists currently of a number of tools. The top bar there is Power BI, which is, we're going to go into each of these individually here and kind of walk through showing what they are, talking a bit about them, and even showing a little bit of how they all talk and work together. Power BI is the reporting. Basically, you could consider this the evolution of what SQL Server Reporting Services was. That Power BI replaces that. It's a reporting tool. It's more than that. It's more powerful. It's newer. It's more modern. It's cloud enabled. But that's what it is. It is the reporting tool that you can build these dynamic dashboards and reports and point it at your data and share those reports and dashboards with people in your organization. That's that tool. There's Power Apps. The next one over. Power Apps is the ability to build low code or even in some cases no code apps, whether they can run on a mobile and tablet natively, they run in a web browser, you actually build them in a web browser. This is nothing that you open Visual Studio for. I promise you tonight we will show absolutely no Visual Studio for anything that we're demoing. All of the development experience you're going to see is either in Power BI, which is the desktop app. The next three are browser-based development environments. But Power Apps is you building a user interface that your users can use to interact with data, to do things, to work through workflows. The next one is Power Automate. Power Automate, and again, this is the brief 50,000-foot overview. Power Automate is back end. Think of it like APIs or scheduled workflows or something that's triggered. Example would be if somebody saves a document to a OneDrive folder, you can trigger a Power Automate workflow to maybe write a row to a database or send an email or something like that. So Power Automate would be a workflow that does not necessarily have a user interface or doesn't have a user interface. It's triggered and it runs unattended. The trigger could be a schedule, could be an event, could be anything. That's Power Automate. The last one, and the one that will probably get the least amount of love tonight from us, just because we have the least amount of experience with it, to be honest, is Power Virtual Agents. If you're ever building a bot that goes into Microsoft Teams or to anything where there's a chat bot, there's a Power Virtual Agents infrastructure that you can write your own chat bots. You can write all of the dynamic workflow and the schematics of if a person asks this or this or this, which branch to go down, what question to ask. That would be Power Virtual Agents. The nice thing about this diagram is the top bar is what we're going to talk about tonight. if you walk away with nothing else from this picture, the things below it, Azure services, API management, Azure functions, Kubernetes services, Logic apps, Azure DevOps, Visual Studio, all the data sources at the bottom, Data Warehouse, Cosmos, SQL, and many more. They all still play. They don't go away. This is not a replacement. If you use any of those today for custom applications or your development team, that's just your expertise. You can continue to do that, leverage what you're good at. But these other things on top, the Power Platform capabilities, actually integrate and read and write data to and from those. So there's a lot of times it's not necessarily 100% to the right, 100% to the left. It's more of a hybrid. We might have a mobile app we wrote in Xamarin that writes to an API that's written in C# that writes to a SQL database. If we need an admin tool for internal users to hit, to manage some data there, just that isn't the public-facing app, we can do that in Power Apps. Or we might write data to a SQL server from a native mobile app, but the Power Automate might trigger on some of those SQL writes and do things like publish to a Slack channel or something like that. So these are all just tools in your toolbox. One doesn't say you should never write C# again, you should go use these tools, or you should never handwrite a report again, Power BI replaces everything. You may find that in your scenario, you still have the need to handwrite more, or maybe Power BI does replace everything. Our hope is to show you what they do and let you make the decision on when one or the other is a fit. And like I said, we're going to go a little bit into each of them tonight, show you enough to make you dangerous. Even if we don't make you dangerous, our hope is to open your eyes a little bit more and explain what they are, so that the next time you're thinking about an app, somebody comes to you and says, this is my problem. I've got employees that are inefficient because of X. You don't always just jump into Visual Studio and start coding to solve X. So it's a different world out there. And the older I've gotten, the more I've started to appreciate all the different solutions that are out there that goes into it. I'm going to skip back to diving in quick, and then I'm going to come back to some of these decks. At the end of the night, we do have, like I said, there's some giveaways and all that. We are going to share a document that has a bunch of resources, so links to many of the things you see tonight. I know we're going to throw a lot of water through the fire hose. We want to make sure we share all the main links. We're going to share links to training, links to pricing. There's a lot that's going to that we have that are just web resources that ArchitectNow did not put together. We just have accumulated and utilized. We want to make sure they're all in your hands. So at the end of the night, I will share links to all of those. And if you see something else, like I said, and we have questions, if it's something that I have a link to, that may be the short answer is, wait till you get the document. It's all there. If not, if you ask questions about something, we may include other things in that document. All right, let's dive in. Terminology. Power Apps. They all have different names. Power Apps, Power BI for business intelligence. Power Automate is, if you've been looking at any of these technologies for a while, Power Automate used to be called Flow. So if you were familiar with flow.microsoft.com, that has been rebranded and renamed Flow. Power Virtual Agent. Microsoft, obviously, as you know, if you've been in this industry for more than 24 hours, things get renamed, things get rebranded. So we're trying to be as current as possible. We use these tools. I am also going to be the first to admit, before going too much farther, that we use these tools heavily on some customers, others not. We can look back at our own customers over the last 2-3 years and think, man, we built that customer a solution from scratch. We probably could have been more efficient by building some percentage of it from scratch and leveraging these tools. These tools haven't been around for 5 or 10 years, but even as they've matured and grown over the last few years, we, as a company, at least in my belief, probably weren't as quick to adopt some of them or leverage them in scenarios they could have been used. We're trying to rectify that. Lately, they are becoming a little more front of mind. Instead of us writing it, spending a week developing a custom HTML or PDF report, Power BI is much quicker to do that. It doesn't fit all scenarios, but at times it does. So, and like I said, I hope that the questions tonight are, could I do this or could I do this? The other thing that I want to lead in with a little bit, and it'll make more sense as we go, and it'll make more sense as we talk about pricing and licensing. What does this cost? What would it take me to use this? And that is important to know at the very beginning, and then that's going to be a topic as we go tonight. The tools that we're going to show tonight are targeted to business apps. Generally, and I say this, there's caveats that you're going to see, but the initial target was internal workflow and business apps. They are licensed primarily as part of a per user license with your Office 365. Just like you say your company uses Office 365 and you've got 100 employees and they all got O365 licenses. If you're going to use Power Apps to build internal workflow tools, you can add the Power Apps license to that or pay for a Power Apps license there. There's standard licensing, there's premium that have different connectors. I'm going to use the term connectors a lot tonight. You're going to learn some terms that you might not be familiar with. But the initial audience would be internal apps. Power BI is the same way. There is embedded Power BI. If you wanted to make a report and embed it in your software as a service application, you can do that. And we'll show you some numbers of what Microsoft may charge you to do that. That could be $2,000, $5,000, $20,000 a month if you wanted to host a report publicly in your website. But if you wanted to share that report amongst your management team or internal, a division, that report license may already be included in your Office 365, or it could be $5 a month per user on there's numbers that go with it all. Pricing and licensing is going to be something we want you to have some understanding of. We get into these discussions with customers all the time, and it does play into our choice of whether these tools make sense. These are not tools you would use to build the next Facebook. You're not going to, if you want to build a very dynamic, rich, graphically impressive mobile app that looks like Instagram, you'd probably be leaning towards a Xamarin, platform over Power BI. Power BI is meant generally to be used internally. Power Apps would be used internally. If you needed a massive scalable API that's going to support 1 million simultaneous users, you're going to be writing that in, a Kubernetes cluster with C# and queuing and a whole bunch of stuff. You're not going to be using Power Automate. These are tools that are low code, meant for what Microsoft's term is going to be the citizen developer. I don't want to say citizen developer because I'm a C# guy. I think I know what I'm doing. Many people on this call are code as part of their day jobs. It's not belittling you, it's giving you a better tool, but it is also bringing into the fold of people being capable of doing these things, individuals who might not know anything about Visual Studio. They can actually be extremely efficient. They might not know how to write a line of C# code. They can still get in here and do something. They probably have a steeper learning curve than those of us that come from a harder core development background to come here. It's going to be easier for us to understand and pick up. That's just the nature of the backgrounds that we come from. All right, enough talk. Let's dive. And there's no method to the order of these, but as we go, hopefully it makes a little bit of sense. Like I said earlier, we're sprinkling a ton of information at you. And like we tried to promote, I know the audience. I've been involved with the .NET Meetup here in St. Louis for a month or so, or a number of months, number of months. We're going to spin everything we show you with some expectation that you have an understanding of development, SQL Server, Azure, things of that nature. So we're going to start with Power Apps, and then we're going to move on to other tools and show how we build things. I have a Windows machine spun up. I have a SQL Server Management Studio, so it's not going to be all no code tonight. It's going to be a mix of all kinds of things. But we're going to show you how these tools fit in the ecosystem that I believe some of you will be familiar with. So we have, in my SQL Server Management Studio here, hopefully everyone sees this, we have a demo SQL Server instance. Now this, just to explain how it works, the SQL Server instance is out in Azure. So it's in the cloud. It's not locally running here. It's not locally running inside my business. if inside my company. If that was the case, there are still ways of doing that. But for purposes of tonight's demonstration, SQL Server is running somewhere else. One other thing you're going to see tonight, just as an FYI, you'll see the words Wildwood Workspaces a lot. We have a company, I wouldn't say sister company, but we own a workspaces, a co-working space in Wildwood called Wildwood Workspaces. Number of businesses use our space and they share desks and they use internet and get free coffee and all of those things. The reason I want to point that out up front tonight, we leverage that ecosystem for our demos in talks like this. So Wildwood Workspaces is an Azure tenant. We have our own Office licenses and Power BI licenses. It's very isolated. We have a Wildwood Workspaces sample we use for Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is going to be a big part of tonight's discussion, but it's our demo environment. So if this would be our Contoso Air, whatever Microsoft has used over the years in their demo world, we use Wildwood Workspaces. So that's what that means. Don't get shocked if you see it a number of times. All right, back to where I was. Power Apps. Power Apps is the ability to build a user interface for somebody to do something. It is a product that Microsoft licenses. Again, you're not going to open Visual Studio and do a whole lot with Power Apps, whether it's Visual Studio Code or anything else. The IDE, as a developer, if that's your background, the IDE is going to be browser-based. So you're able to do it right here inside of a browser. So if I wanted to create a new app, I could say create. There's some options. You can either start from the type of app you want. We'll talk about these, or you could start from data. And we're going to use this, and we're going to do Power Apps, then Power Automate, then Power BI. There's a number of different things as a developer you may be familiar with. There's a Canvas app. A Canvas app is an app where you have a little bit more control over the UI. You can drag and drop text boxes and labels and move things around and design the UI, both for tablet, for phone, for Windows, whatever, for browser, I guess. You can control things that way. The other type of app you can build is a model-driven app. You point it at data, and it looks at the data and says, I found a person entity, and it has first name, last name, email, whatever, company name. It will dynamically generate a very consistent user interface off the model that it finds. It does all your CRUD operations, your lists, your sorting, everything you would expect. A model-driven app, if you're familiar with Microsoft Dynamics 365, which will come up tonight, Dynamics is an example of model-driven apps in a lot of cases. So there's also Canvas apps in Dynamics. We use Dynamics to run a lot of our business, and we're familiar with both these two types of apps from that. The other option you get here at the top is a portal. A portal would be a publicly facing, more of a website. It'd be more of a CRM. You still use a lot of the same Power Apps infrastructure, all of the UI design, all of that, but you're building a public facing website that people can hit on any browser or device, and it renders HTML. There's different pricing for portals, whether you want anonymous users, you want authenticated users, but portals is a thing, and I'm going to show you a portal tonight as well. But those are the three types of apps that you can start from. If you wanted a blank app, you could go this route, and I'm going to create one here in a second. We're also going to show one, but I want to demonstrate a little bit about the capabilities. Down the second group here is start from data. The word connector, again, that as I go through all of the talk tonight, I'm going to use that term significantly. Connectors. If I'm a C# developer, I think about databases, generally SQL in St. Louis. We're a Mongo shop, so we're a Mongo partner. We think Mongo. No matter what your database is, when you're building an app, it's likely there's data. In the Power Platform world, that data is abstracted in the concepts through the concept of various connectors. If I took other data sources as an example, it will list various data sources. Connections. Hold on, let me close this. Show it a little different way. Hold on. I'm closing a few tabs I have open here. Oops, right to here. Some of them are going to be SharePoint, Excel, SQL Server, Common Data Service, all kinds of different things. You can pick whatever you want. to build. If I, down here, there's templates, I'll come to templates in a second, but if I pick SQL Server, it's going to open up and say, here's some SQL Server databases that you've connected to in the past. Do you want to create a new connection, or is it one that I might have already used before? So I have this Power Platform demo SQL Server. It's got a check-ins table. We're going to use this as part of tonight's thing. I'll come back to it. If I wanted a new connection, doesn't have to be what you would consider a traditional database. That is important. The connections here are APIs. People have written what's called connectors for the Power Platform. Thousands of people have written these connectors. Amazon, Apache, Dropbox, Dynamics, FTP servers, Google Drive, Google Sheets. This goes and goes and goes. These are some that I have available. There are many, many more than this. Thousands of things that you can find and search for. Common Data Service is a new one in the Microsoft ecosystem that you're going to hear a lot about tonight. But there's all kinds of different things you'll see, and I'm going to show like Salesforce, PostgreSQL, Oracle, OneDrive, Teradata, User Voice, Zendesk. This is a small 20 or 30 sample of things that I've used in the past to hit. It's not an overarching list of things that you can connect to, but think of them all as APIs. Generally REST APIs, if you're interested in the structure, they're all REST APIs that all have a consistent interface, that REST interface. So you can perform CRUD operations, you get notified. They'll have a very consistent way of notifying on changes. They're all connectors at where you get your data. So when you're building a Power App, one of the steps you can have to think of is what is the connector, and that connector in a lot of cases, the database. That's where you're going to get it. It does not have to be a physical database. Another thing worth noting about Power Apps, they're serverless to you. Power Automate is serverless. You don't care about infrastructure. You don't care about location. You don't spend a lot of time thinking, I want this to run in North Central US or South Central US or Europe. They're all serverless. You just say, here's a connector. And with that connector, you give it enough connection information that it can find it. If you picked SharePoint, it would ask you your URL to the SharePoint implementation. If you picked OneDrive, it would ask you to authenticate into OneDrive. If you pick SQL Server, it's going to ask you enough information for SQL Server connection information. So if I pick SQL Server, just to give you a quick demo, I said a phone layout for SQL Server, and I picked this check-ins table, which we'll use, but I'm just going to pick it for now. And I said connect. It is going to create a Power App for me. This is probably the quickest way for us to demo to you what this means and what it looks like. It's creating a Canvas Power App connecting to a SQL Server table. Now, that SQL Server table was available to us a minute ago because we already, in our Power Apps implementation, created a connection, and we gave it the connection string information that we told it the server, we told it the database name, we told it the username and password. We stepped through a few things, and we're not going to show that because it's somewhat anticlimactic. We gave it a SQL Server connection string. It remembers that connection string inside of our Power Apps implementation. And a Power App is not tied to one table. It can be as complex as you want. But this is what it did. It actually connected to DBO check-ins. It created a dummy app. Notice I get a full IDE. I can edit all my properties. I can change what's bound to what. I can see different screens that are in here. There's a browse screen. There's a detail screen. This is what happens if I click on one. There's an edit screen. This would be the edit. It created all this simply by looking at the SQL Server table, reverse engineering the columns and the data types, and plugging them in. I could customize from here. I didn't need to do that. I could have started from a 100% blank slate, but I left this in here just to show how it does. Here's my widgets. If I wanted to run this app, there's a play up here. It runs right in a browser. I can change this thing to, I can put anything Blogger 2. It's got a little UI. It saves it to SQL Server. Come back. Eventually it should. Not sure if it aired. I don't know if it lets me run the whole thing from here, but I'm actually in kind of a quote unquote play mode even while I see it right here, and click through my browser screen and all that. Notice it says Blogger 2 in my data. It actually is hitting the live database through that connector as I'm making changes. I mentioned earlier, this is canvas mode. It lets me drag things around and move things in size and position and do a lot of things. There's no IDE. You don't load anything in Visual Studio. You do these changes here. When I'm done with this and I want to share this, I can publish right from here, and immediately people in my organization, now again, I don't want to go too far down the path of licensing yet, but it generally is people in my Office 365 Active Directory, Azure Active Directory domain. I can share this app with them. They can refresh on their phone and they will see this, and I will give a demo of how that works for them in a second. But you have full control. What you don't have is C#. You don't have Visual Studio. You don't have debugging and breakpoints. It works a little bit more, and for lack of I don't know a better way of saying it myself, but this is how I think about it. Things have this Microsoft Excel bar up here where you can put in your own functions. The function bar in Excel, it's not Excel, but it works that way. So this is a more complex function up here. Sort by columns, and you can type stuff in. It's its own, I hate to say language, that's probably overselling it, but its own syntax for doing things that you need to do. You can put functions on controls as to what they display, as to what they edit, as to if I was at my detail screen, or let's go to the edit screen, sorry. I'm just going to my screens over here, the edit screen, like here, even inside of this thing in this card, it just pulls in data, what it's bound to, parent.display name, and it comes up for the data it's bound to. There's data binding, and it does all of that. Under data binding, the text is bound to parent.display name for what the card is. So it's not uber simple, but also the complexity is simpler than what you may find if I just threw you at JavaScript and CSS, right? So there's a learning curve. I don't want to belittle and say you're just going to do this out of, but the learning curve here could be hours or a day, whereas becoming a TypeScript Angular expert or a React expert and learning all there is to know about browser integration, or if you wanted to publish this into a mobile app, the learning curve there is going to be obviously more than what you see here. Down here at the bottom, I can close this guy. Looking for, you can do new screens. There's some templates, calendars, email people. This is the quick intro. We're going to come on to some other stuff here in a bit that hopefully we'll put this in a little better frame of mind. You can switch between the screens in your app. You can see what these would look like on, if I ran this right here, used to be, I'm not seeing it right now. You could see the tablet version or the mobile version or the web version. You can do whole forms and subforms, and it's very complex and beyond the scope of tonight's particular talk to show every variation and every capability, but we're going to show a number of them as we get into it. So, but this is all browser based. One oddity worth pointing out, at least while I'm on this particular screen, is this editor, this in-browser editing experience that I'm kind of quickly touching on is not available on iPads or Android devices. I guess I only know iPads. I can't really speak 100% to Android devices, but I work a lot on my iPad. I have an iPad Pro, a 12.9-inch iPad Pro. This screen does not work. And when I say it does not work, it's not that it just breaks. You get a message that says currently not supported. It doesn't even get this far. It says you cannot edit Power Apps on this particular device. You have to use a full Mac or Windows desktop to get to this editing experience, which is, I thought, great, there's no Visual Studio. I should be able to use my iPad to do a significant amount of additional development, but it doesn't necessarily work that way. And it will do checking, it will do publishing, it'll do everything from here. You are able to export all of this stuff as a file, but generally you do your publishing and your sharing. You can save this app and publish it anywhere. I can give it a name. Save. It saves it out into the cloud. If I wanted to share it right here, it asks me who I want to share it with. I can share it with different users. I could share it with groups of users. We don't have a lot of groups in this particular thing, but I can, it's all Active Directory. So you can say you have an internal admin app that only management should see. That'll work. It will pop up on your phone. Let me see if I can show that really fast, just as a quick demo. since I'm the owner. Give me 1 second here. Oops. Here is my phone. If I go back to this screen, what you're looking at is my actual iPhone streamed up to this computer. Notice right here where my mouse is moving, there's Power Apps. If I click Power Apps, when you publish a Power App, it runs inside the mobile or tablet Power App container, the shell that is the Power Apps app. So it's not opening right now. There it goes. So I've got 2 Power Apps under Wildwood Workspaces, and I could have as many as my business wanted to share with me. If I had 10 different workflow apps that allowed me to do something nice that solved problems that we'll talk about advanced capabilities in a second, but don't think that Power Apps are limited to just CRUD or data entry or listing data. You can plug in full AI, you can integrate the camera, you can do object recognition, text recognition, you can automate all kinds of things, but no matter what, you don't build one big monolithic app. Is kind of the pattern that they're going for. You build smaller, dedicated workflow solutions. I just shared this .NET Meetup demo. If I click it, it opens it as a native app and it renders, and behind the scenes, it calls out to an API in the cloud. That connector is an API, remember, and it hits my database, and I'm able to come in here and edit all that data. And if I clicked on one of these, I can click the delete button. It will delete that guy. If I click this guy, click the edit pencil, I can change this to desk number 22222222333. Done. Check. Within seconds, I've built a mobile app that runs. Now, do I like that this says the dbo.checkins or any of that? No, that's all trivial stuff for me. I could come back here very quickly and say edit and change all of those names right in the browser. I hope it says it can't edit it because I have it opened. I closed it on my phone. Just like anything, I could click this guy up here, change this to be, right? So it's really that easy. I click save and publish. People that have this app, the Power Apps app on their phone are able to they get a notification that says a new version is available. Touch here to upload and they get a new version. So I'm building these internally focused workflow type applications very quickly, and I've got a lot of power as to what I can put in. It will do business card readers, for object detectors. There's virtual reality, but no, there's all kinds of form processing and receipt processing and media. There's cameras. I could plug in a camera, barcode scanner, Microsoft Stream or audio. These are widgets that you can drop over and customize in this formula bar and do whatever you want. There's augmented reality. It'll put images on top of other stuff. So it's significantly more powerful than even I maybe have thought when I really got into the ecosystem. So as you're building apps, there's a lot that it does. I'm going to skip ahead a few slides here. Here's some examples of some UIs. They're not super simple. You do mapping, you can do geocoding, geolocation. We just grabbed a few online and showed some things that we thought had a user interface. If you want to take the time to style these user interfaces and make them very professional, you can do as much or as little of that as you want. The controls come, with the standard UI and some themes. You can go beyond it. The other thing about Power Apps, it runs on iOS, Android, phone, browsers. There's also down here, start from a template. This is one of the most, in my mind, underappreciated and powerful things. If you're looking at this and thinking, wow, there's some real simple things we might be able to leverage this for around our office, like a service desk or help desk or capturing meetings or expense report or fundraising, you can, instead of starting from scratch, Microsoft has a complete ecosystem of templates that just basically create out of the box everything for you, and then you customize from there. So if you needed I'm just going to randomly pick one, a cost estimator, you could pick a cost estimator, give it a name. It'll create a Canvas app for a phone. It'll spin the whole thing up, set up all the data sources for you, and do everything. Now, is it going to be perfect for your particular situation right out of the box? Probably not. But it's basically giving you the entire setup. So there's a lot to be learned from doing this as well. I can make it my own app. It's going to store its data just because that's what it does in it's telling me I now connected to my OneDrive. I want to save it with that name. I'm just going to leave it Cost Estimator 005. Very quickly, just using one of the templates, I'm going to share it. Now it's going to take me back in, or it's going to make me click Edit. Again, to show you what it does. Let me in. Here it is. I can run this. It's got some dummy data they created for me. I can begin an estimate. Not a bad little UI. I could customize this. I got vinyl floor, drop downs, notice images, pick some things, add some photos. It'll take some pictures with my camera. Really don't want it open on my camera, but I can type stuff in. I can customize. I can stop running and come in here and change everything that I found. I can add more screens. I can add more connections. It's not that a Power App points at just one connector. It could have many. You could have one screen that reads and writes from a OneDrive folder, another from a Google Doc, another from a SQL Server, another from Cosmos DB, whatever, as complex as you need to get. And these template apps are great starting points, and they're also great learning exercises and figuring out the capabilities. I've created a number of them just to play around and see what the capabilities are and what I'm looking at, how it might work. And we'll come back to Power Apps in a bit, but Power Apps are the front end. They're the UI. They are using connectors to integrate user interface workflows with data on the back end. The data that it hits, if I wanted to come here and go insert, I can insert data. You can do data tables, but I can put more databases in here, data connectors in here. Don's the expert at hitting all of these as we come in. Upload images. There's, I hate to say debugging, there's monitor capabilities. It'll open this monitor and then I can use it. We just talked about this a bit ago. As now I use the app, it'll kind of show me what it does behind the scenes if I were to run it. So I come back here, it's showing me my navigation from screen to screen, what I clicked on, the data that was sent. It's not rudiment, it's not trivial. There's a lot going on. They try to simplify, but for those of us that are used to this type of telemetry and debugging, it's still here to some regard. It'll show me what, when I clicked that button, here's what code was called, here was the request that was sent to the server. If there was a request sent to the server, here's the response. Now, what I did didn't trigger any, the data was already in the device. Whoops. But if I did something here, if I typed something in 12 by 12 and 10 by 10, and I review this estimate, oh, I'm missing the field. Oh, gotta stop drawing type. Good enough. There, submit estimate. Oh, it emailed me somehow. Look at that, it opened up an email automatically right from a Power App. It put everything in there. If I go back to the monitor, now down here you see functions are called, the requests on some of these. There's too much movement here. It'll show basically what's being sent out of there, even though I can't find it. But you see all kinds of logic. Now there are conditionals, and this is an example of a pretty complex. If there this, attach this image or do this. There's more to it than you think, but it's all there. And I can publish this internally. I can share this. Everyone in my company or groups, divisions, departments, whatever you do, you can build apps extremely fast, much faster to build a similar type environment this way than for me. As much as I hate to say it, as good as I think that me and my team are, for certain types of apps, there's no way we're going to build it, deploy it, get it through a DevOps cycle, get it published in a store, and get it released to users. We just couldn't keep up with doing it this way. This is going to be the quickest and cheapest way to build certain things. You do hit a brick wall, maybe, if there could be scenarios where it's so complex that we just have to custom code it. And we have that capability too. So we would have to think as a team when a scenario fits this and when a scenario fits that. Or if a scenario fits this for 80%, we can custom write something to solve the other 20. We would have to think of all those. Let's leave this here for a minute and we'll switch over to Power Automate. So this was all Power Apps, all user interface driven, phone, tablet, web. I'm going to come back to portals later. Again, I'm throwing a lot of stuff out there, but we're going to switch to Power Apps. We're going to switch to a different browser. Let me switch over to Windows. I don't know why I just had it open over here. Now we're going to go to flow.microsoft.com. This is called Power Automate. That's the title up here. Power Automate. There, it's a different piece of the same overall ecosystem, the Power Platform. Power Automate is, think of it like your APIs, your server-side code, your unattended, scheduled, or triggered things. If I wanted to create a new Power Automate, this is the easiest way to give you an example. I can create from template. There's no user interface. Power Automate, Power Apps has the user interface. You're designing, you're dragging and dropping, you're building things. Power Automate does not have a user interface. It's meant to be triggered. There are thousands of templates that give you all kinds of different scenarios as examples. The reason I show these, and I'll talk about a few, gives you an example of what's possible. These templates in Power Automate use the same connectors, whether it's SQL Server, SharePoint, custom APIs, third-party APIs. If I come in here and said, I want to do an approval process, start approval when a new item is added to a SharePoint list, and it'll go into an approval process through Office and then come out and do an email Outlook. All of these are processes, things that get done. I'm going to type SQL just because we're a SQL shop. Insert a row in a SQL table when a Power Apps button is clicked, or insert a SQL row, post to Teams on approval of a completed planner task. There's email. Kind of find a decent one here. I'm just randomly reading these. I didn't have one queued up. If you get a tweet, retweet it. This is more your, I hate to say your code, and I hate also, and I've done this in the past, but some people appreciate it. This is not meant to be biz talk. You're not moving, biz talk was more of a data manipulation, transform tool, an ETL tool. This is not, but you do get a push notification when you receive an email from your boss, as an example, just taking the second one. If I click this, it's going to say, well, I need to connect to Outlook and I need to connect to your Microsoft 365. So I need to connect to all these. It already knows it's me, so it's got access. It needs to connect here, so it's going to ask me to sign in again. It already did. It didn't ask me. And it's going to sign in again. It just made me, if I had not already authenticated under this KB Gross at Wildwood Workspaces, it would have forced me to authenticate. If I had picked external systems, third-party tools, it would have forced me to log in. If I create this flow now, this is the flow. Think of it as a server-side code. Serverless, you don't care where it lives. Microsoft handles where it lives. It handles provisioning it. But this is the designer. When we were in Power Apps, the designer was dragging or moving widgets and binding data and going from screen to screen and figuring out the layout for a tablet versus mobile. Power Automate is more workflow based. On a new email, in my inbox, I could pick any inboxes it connects. If it was a new email in my outbox or my junk email, I could pick that. It's connected automatically to my Office 365 account. Get my profile, so it gets my profile. Get my manager, so it's using the user principal of my manager. Then check if it is my manager. This has a condition. It says if manager is equal to this, if yes, send a push notification. Boss said, here's a link and go to Office 365. It's just an example. I can make this say whatever. If no, so I'm graphically designing out. I mentioned earlier the concept of a citizen developer, somebody that might not be as familiar with just opening up C# and writing an Azure function. Could you do this in an Azure function? Yes. Could you do it here? Yes. Are there scenarios where one or the other is better? Yes. But this is very quick. We listen. If somebody gets an email and has an attachment, we save it off to OneDrive or SharePoint. There's lots of those little one-off things that make our business better. We're able to do this in a matter of seconds. Sometimes seconds, sometimes minutes, sometimes an hour. It's not that we code for a week. We could do automated flows. So to give you an example of what some of these mean, if I create a blank flow, an automated flow is triggered by a designated event. So I'm going to walk through these just because it's important for you to see some of these options, because if you're like me, your backgrounds may, I'm going to trigger some understanding when you see what these are. I'm going to give it an automated flow. Automated is triggered. What type of triggers? When a new item is created in SharePoint, or a file is created in OneDrive, or an RSS feed item is published, or in DevOps. So there's all kinds of DevOps integration. A build process completes, a work item, code is pushed to Git, or code is pushed to the old TFS. When I'm mentioned in a channel in Teams, and these go on for miles. We could say that we're on the bees. We could be here all day just looking at various triggers. When an envelope status changes in DocuSign, they're not always Microsoft, they're third-party things. But I could search. We use a tool called Harvest to do our time entry for ArchitectNow. When a client is added to Harvest, this is a third-party tool, unrelated to Power Automate or Power Apps, but they publish their own connector into the store, so I don't have to code against their API. I can automate my entire Harvest integration. Whenever a new user is added to Harvest, boom, I can check this and start. This thing that I check, and I only get one, is the thing that starts this flow. The data that comes in from this user right here is the data that gets passed into the flow. I could do HTML, not HTML, HTTP, sorry, my bad. Whoops. Can't remember what they called it, WebEx. You could treat the trigger as an HTTP post or a GET. They're down in here somewhere. But there's you see these WebEx, Huddle, Basecamp. The ecosystem is broad to trigger. Now that's a triggered thing. You start the flow with the trigger. Instant flow, triggered manually as needed. That would be if you're building an app or a Power App, the UI thing we talked about a second ago, you could trigger it through there. So this is something I want to trigger it immediately on when a file is selected, or an HTTP or a webhook. It's going to happen right. This is the HTTP one I was looking for a second ago, or a webhook. We build a lot of our webhooks this way. When an HTTP request is received, when a row is selected in Excel Online, you could trigger these types of flows through anything, through a Power App, as I mentioned. So that is an instant flow triggered by an instant event like a web request. When you create one with an HTTP, as part of the creation process, it generates you a URL. And that URL you can embed into other apps, and you can call this flow it's an API. You can post to it, and the data that you post to it gets sent into the flow. Webhooks are a good example. It gives you can hook webhooks up to it. A scheduled flow. I want this one to run on a schedule. Starting here, every minute, every second, custom. You can get pretty complex, but we have flows that send out email statuses on some company metrics every Friday at 3. It's just an automated flow. It calls some APIs. It does some things. It generates some emails. It's a flow. We schedule it. We don't write much scheduling information anymore. We might set up an API endpoint if we need to code it, but the scheduling piece is now just a scheduled flow to call it. Business process flow. This one's more multi-step and advanced. UI flow is relatively new. The first 3 are the older 3 in this ecosystem. many of you may work in environments where your infrastructure is not all modern and new. You might have old Windows apps or mainframe apps, or you have something that runs on a Windows desktop or on a server that sits on a client. UI flow will basically let you set up a virtual machine with all of your thick client infrastructure. You can record all the interactions and it will replay it back every time the flow is triggered. So if something new happens, it'll spin up that VM, run your desktop app, take data that gets passed into the flow, paste it into all the right fields automatically, just like someone was typing, click buttons, do whatever it may be, get data out. Maybe another screen pops up. It can read text boxes or grids, or it's very complex. Keeps these virtual machines turned off, turns them on only as the flow is triggered. But it gets big. It'll do a desktop app compatible with Windows 10 machines running 64-bit operating system. So that's one limitation they have right now. If you can get your app running on at least this, even in emulation mode, or a web app, it'll open anything that you can do in Chrome or Edge, enter data, read data. The entire flow has access to the context of where that current data sits as it goes through, and it can be triggered by anything. So you can have a flow triggered by a button in another app that opens a web page, types some data, click save, come back. There's a lot to Power Automate. Now it records both of these environments, but then it plays it back behind the scenes in a virtual machine as you get. So I click here, then it comes into what's the URL, what's the flow name, flows for the web. It'll launch the recorder, lets you record just like the old Microsoft test environment would do. Selenium ID script is what comes out. It uses Selenium just like if you're writing unit tests. It then saves that whole process and you have access to it. So UI flows are within the last year, but there's a lot you can do with UI flows. I've seen demos. Microsoft gives it a lot of conference where even though it's the Windows one is running on a Windows desktop, you can still shell out to mainframe apps and it'll pull stuff in from those mainframe apps. As long as you can use a you can use a shell emulator on the desktop, it has access to more than just what's given from Windows. But they're pretty complex. Business process flows get you into AI builder, all kinds of stuff, web page, looking at URL history. This is more on the complex end, but it's a multi-step, long duration between process flows. It'll wake up and continue. Like somebody has to approve, send an email to a new employee. They might not get it for 3 days. They need approval after they've taken training X. They get it. Boss approves and said they passed. All of those. That workflow might last a week or 2 weeks to complete. There's all kinds of steps in the middle. This is a longer running flow that will maintain state and keep waking up and continue to do stuff. So all kinds of things it'll do in the middle. Polls, waiting for responses, things of that nature. But still, everything in this list of 5 things right here, back-end things, triggered, instant, scheduled. They could be complex enough to be automating things like UIs and things of that nature. But ultimately, once you record that UI flow, it's intended to be played back behind the scenes by this back-end thing. Now, could you write all this stuff yourself if you're an efficient developer? Yes, you could. Do you get all the ecosystem? I can come into my flows, like I have an example we're going to get into here in a bit, get a push notification, receive an email. My team flow here is send an email when an item is created in SQL Server. Every time a new row gets added to our check-ins table, it sends an email. If I edit this flow, very simple. I pointed it using the same connector that we used for check-ins at a SQL Server database, DBO check-ins, the same one we used in the Power App. Send an email. It allows me down here to pick dynamic content that comes out of the first one, and I can drag. This is actually the columns in that database table. It knows it. I can build out my email template. I can give it a subject who it goes to. I can add attachments and BCC and importance and other stuff if I wanted, but that's just the send email. If I wanted a conditional in the middle, I can add an action and it will let me pick actions. Built-in control, I can if this, then this. These are all of the flow actions. Detect, if I have AI Builder enabled, it will take an image and it will count the number of objects. If I've given it a picture of a basketball, for example, I can actually very quickly with very little code to no code say detect and count the number of objects and only email me if there was an attachment on this email that had 2 basketballs or more. And it will do that with anything. It will scan images of forms and do text recognition and classify text into categories. It'll do handwriting recognition. convert it to text, and I can use that in any way further down the line here. So things that you could probably do in code if you know the libraries and you have the capabilities, but it's more drag and drop and click and figuring out all the options. Extract key phrases or predict. This is all the AI stuff. It'll run scripts in Excel Online. It'll get the weather forecast. Only email me on bad days. I only want, if somebody adds a row to my check-in, if it's cloudy out, email me. As weird as that sounds, as a cliched, dumb example, it's possible. I mean, it's very easy. I wouldn't really waste a lot of time coding it. I just click a button and it would happen. You can do parallel branches if you have a scenario. Hate to say it's multi-threaded, it just runs 2 branches at once and they both succeed or fail independently. All kinds of things. You can test this right here. It'll just read my SQL Server database. Boom, up will come an email. Here in a second, it's running it. It actually will give me a green checkbox and I got an email. A new member has checked in at Wildwood Workspaces, or at Workspaces. So it took 0 seconds to do that, some milliseconds, roughly 1 second to do this. But this is all of what we would consider Power Automate. Somebody just wrote a question. Power Automate is the back end. Now, they're 2 different tools. They both are considered part of Power Platform. Power Apps, you're writing code. Power Automate, or you're doing UI, sorry, you're building UIs. Over here, you get into the back end scheduled automated workflows, and they could be triggered by any number of things, any connector, thousands of connectors, third party and otherwise. It could be SQL, Cosmos. Those are your traditional quote unquote databases. Any other API. If you're familiar with Salesforce, there's Salesforce connectors. Salesforce is kind of outside the Microsoft ecosystem, but we use Dynamics, I guess, instead of Salesforce, and in their connectors. In my Dynamics space, I can come in here and create a flow and say, I want to create a flow. I want to instant flow, and we're a dynamic shop, so I can say, whoops. Sorry, my caps lock's on. It's not hitting any there. Which one was it? Maybe I picked the wrong. So if somebody does a business event or a record is created or anything in Dynamics, somebody creates a new account, I can say, anybody goes into my Microsoft Dynamics instance and types in a new account and hit save, that triggers a flow out here. So we automate a lot of our business processes within Dynamics by listening for various events that we care about, and not necessarily just something as simple as emailing us, but we might generate documents or folders in SharePoint. Lots of little things that are just repetitive, we can do very easy with this Power Automate. And if it's something more complex, back to the whole development side of what we do, inside of a particular flow, let me go back in here and edit. Many of you are saying, well, where's all my development expertise go? When something in here doesn't, I want to add an action. Some of these actions aren't just simple AI Builder plug and play things. I can call another API, or what am I looking for? API. I can plug this in and call, it'll actually hit a Swagger doc and give me access to all of the endpoints. But if I know what I'm doing, I can enter I want to do a post to this URL. Here's my headers, queries, here's the body that I want to post. So you can call out to an API. So this might run and be triggered, and all of that infrastructure is given to you out of the box. But if you need to do something at some point in here, some conditional says, man, it's time for me to call an API, you can just add an HTTP action and give it the URL to your API out there in the world, however you manage it, pass your data in. You can create JSON in here and just pass in, say I had row ID or something that I knew from my, whatever comes into this action comes from the one before it. So it's a sequential workflow, if you will. It's a flow chart. Any data that's sent in, or if I had to read a row out of a data store, the row that I read would be available for me to pass down in future actions. You're not trying to teach all the intricacies of how it works, but that's the 50,000 foot view of how that might work. If I decided I didn't want this, I just delete it. The whole flow goes back to how it was. I can save, I can publish. The other thing that you don't get if you handwrite this, or I hate to say you don't get, but are more difficult, is the history. I can come in here and see every time this ran, I tested it. It ran twice 2 hours ago. It's relatively new. We moved it over into here. I can see who owns it. I can see who it's connected to. There's a lot of ecosystem built around making sure this thing is available, running, succeeding for a developer to come in. I can go into any of the runs. It'll show me what data came in. So I could come into this one. It'll say it ran, hit this database. It went and sent an email, and this was the email it sent. So I got a complete audit history of every single run that it performed. Now, could you build that into your own infrastructure? Yes, you could. Is it valuable for you to do that if you're able to leverage something like this where you get that ecosystem? That's debatable depending on your scenario. Next, I'm going to switch gears. We did Power Apps. I did a quick overview of Power Automate. And there's both of those, I scratched the surface, right? I sprinkled enough information to hopefully give you an idea of what it is. One big takeaway would be connectors. If you can remember connectors are the different databases or anything. Here's a list of connectors for Power Automate. Recently added, these are some new ones. Notice tons of things you may or may not recognize. These are third-party. People are publishing these connectors. Think of a connector as an API. And we haven't even touched Common Data Service, but I want to talk about that a lot here in a minute. But these connectors do a lot. Azure Devops is a connector. If I connected to Azure Devops, I got tons of things I can do. When a build completes, when a work item, when code is checked in, lots of templates that come, lots of things that go on just using DevOps. But SharePoint, GitHub, Bing, tools that you may use in your business that are maybe non-standard in the Microsoft ecosystem, but that particular, your vendor published a connector in here. So you can, these connectors are the consistent here in Power Automate as they are in Power Apps. So in Power Apps, you can also hit the same connectors and build UIs on top of those connectors. So connectors are your common platform for getting data in and out. The trick is you can write your own connectors. If there's something very specific to your business, it's actually very easy. You build a documented REST API. If you know how to do that, whatever platform you know how to do that, you can come in here, say new connector, and there's some steps to map the REST API from your endpoints over this little tool, and your connector shows up internally for you. If you have a tool, maybe your company publishes your app out in the world and consumers use it, you could publish your connector definition into the store and make it available just like these people have. Motimate or SMS Link or SMS API. I don't know who these people are, but recently they published their connectors. You will see the word premium under some of these. What that means is that you need the users that are going to use any Power Automate or Power App integration with these connectors are going to have, Microsoft charges you more for a premium license. And we'll come to pricing here in a little bit, but that's what that means. Some of these say premium, some do not. Some are included at the lower end Power Apps license, some are included at the premium Power Apps license. I don't know enough to tell you why the decision is made here, if it's the choice of Microsoft or these other people. It may be very obvious, I just don't know. The standard, there's only two levels, standard and premium. Let's switch to Power BI is the next one. Power BI is the reporting side of all this. It is to create reports. Oops. It is I'm going to publish really fast and click yes. I didn't intend to click no there, but. Now, there is a Power BI website you can go to. Sorry, it's publishing some changes I made a second ago. So you can go, I don't know if I have it up. Maybe I do. Yes, app.powerbi.com. And again, these are all URLs and links that are easy to find with Google or will share elsewhere. But you can see, you can go home, you can see your reports. I've just got a few in here that I've loaded as a sample. My workspace is a folder. There's a dashboard, or I called it a dashboard. It's really a report. I can find reports. What are we doing with Power BI? We are hitting these connectors and we're graphically representing that data back to stakeholders. It could be your end users, it could be your management, it could be your department heads, somebody. How often have we been custom writing an app and we needed reports? If you're familiar with SQL Server reporting services, this is the future evolution of what that is. That tool went away. This tool replaced it. you can publish these reports. I created a report here. What Don and I did earlier today is we created a SQL Server database. We created a simple database table called Demo SQL, and in it, it has a table called check-ins. One table, that's the extent of our database. Check-ins has a date, it has an ID, name, first name, last name, email, location, a desk number, a gender, and that's really it. We then created some Power Apps that hit it, and we had, whoops. I mean, it's not rocket science, but over here we have apps. I've got a check-in demo that Don created, and this is my app. Oh, it says I need to log in again. Not sure why. This is what it is. It's on my phone. I did this earlier. It's a little more polished in Don's version than mine because he knows what he's doing. I can create a new check-in. I can pick a time. I'll say this time. Okay. 2. Somebody just asked, is SSRS going away? It went away a long time ago is the short answer. SSRS hasn't been, it's still there, but it's been replaced a number of years ago with Power BI. There's going to be, that I know of, no future versions of SQL Server reporting services. Power BI will import some of your reporting services. And I do not claim to be the expert as to what they will or won't import, but there is somewhat of a migration. Some reports are being able to move forward. Others on the call may be able to answer that question better than me. But yes, we do not use SSRS much anymore. I'm going to check in. There's my check-in. I can sort. I can search. Now, this is just kind of out of the box. There's not a whole lot to it, but it let me do that. In a second, it actually would run on my phone and do the same thing. It would write to the SQL Server out in the cloud. I'll get an email here in a second if all goes well. And the flow kicked off. Again, the Power App and the Power Automate are separate. But if I go back to Power BI, this is the designer for Power BI. I created a dummy little report. I gave it a theme. Power BI Designer, first off, is Windows. If you notice the screen I'm sharing with you tonight, I didn't bring this up, but I'm on a Mac. I'm on a very large MacBook Pro. I'm also running Parallels, so I'm running Windows. So Power BI Desktop is a Windows-only app to edit the reports. So for me doing my report designing, it's only on Windows. To some of you, that might not be an issue. To others, you're just going to have to find a way to run Windows on your Mac. Oh, there's my check-in, my flow. Members checked in. It was me again. I didn't do any formatting, but my flow worked. So Power App and Flow work together thus far. Over here, I created with some visualizations this little nice report. It shows me my raw data. I pointed it at, guess what I did when I came in here? I'm going to create a new report. New. It's going to open a new instance of Power BI Desktop. This is the designer. Where these reports are viewable at is a much broader ecosystem than a Windows desktop. They're on your phones, your tablets, web, potentially even embedded in your desktop. But this tool is a data visualization tool. So when you start to visualize data, it comes from one source, but what happens is you have access to, guess what? The same ecosystem of connectors. So you can read data and do stuff there. So Cosmos, lots of things, third party, just tons of stuff, data flows, all kinds of different plugins that Power BI will let you read. Excel, flat files, PDFs, SharePoint folders, SQL servers. It'll directly connect to most Azure ecosystem stuff, table storage, blob storage, data lake, Gen 1 and 2. All kinds of things that you have access to if you're building a report. Other third-party online things, Azure Devops, all your boards, Dynamics if you're using Dynamics, email and Exchange if you wanted metrics on that. A dashboard or report can mix and match as many of these as they want. It's not that it's limited to one thing. It's not that I'm going to build a report and it must only show GitHub data. You could say, I'm going to integrate GitHub data with my, I don't know, my DevOps boards just to show, I don't know why I do two competing services, but you could mix and match. I can get data, say I wanted to do SQL Server. It will let me connect to SQL Server. I don't have one. I'm going to switch back to my other one where I've already connected. In this one, once I connect to SQL Server, it shows I entered a connection information, and it shows me in my fields, and that simple check-ins, my row ID, my names, lets me browse the data. If I had multiple tables, it would let me dictate all of the structure and the relationships and the foreign key constraints. It can be as complex as you want. Like I said, this is the evolution of reporting services. So it does that plus 1,000% more than what that tool did in much more efficient ways at how it runs. This is the modern version. Reports can have multiple tabs. If I wanted something down here, I could say I want a new visual. It's going to drop this thing. I want to put it somewhere. Running out of room. Say I'm going to minimize this one. I'm going to put this one up here. I've got some design constraints set, so it's going to snap to a grid because I did that. So now I've got this thing, what I want it to look like. Well, maybe I want, I don't know, I want this kind of a clustered bar chart. Then it just lets me take my data, and this is a simplified version of what my data is here. I've got the basic stuff, and I could say I'm going to drag this into my values. Boom. Now it's showing my check-in date, which is a date, so it has some, I could cluster it. That's probably a bad example. I might want that as, I picked a random data type. I might not want a custom bar chart. Let's make this. So now I got more of a line chart. I could say check-in date. Yeah, I need a count. So it not showing any. The data that you're seeing in this check-ins table, as an FYI, we generated, I don't know what I did with it. We use a tool called Makaru, FYI. So it's random data. It's not real data from anywhere that we have or own. It's just, we use a tool called makaru.com. It will allow you to generate sample data. We're big proponents of this, so I can come in here and pick any data types, any number of rows, preview it, and it'll just generate dummy data. I generated dummy check-in data and filled our database. We do it on a lot of our projects so that we get a significant amount of real world, as accurate as possible data very early in the development cycle. So we did that for this particular database. But let me leave that up there for now. I can integrate with my data. I'm not going to try to screw with that one, but I can come over here and see, here I've got the row ID I'm counting. My axis is my check-in date, which is the bottom. I can say only month and day. I get a report designer. I'm using visuals. Some of these visuals are very complex. You can do maps. You can do full maps. You can do filled maps, heat maps, tree maps, scatter charts, all kinds of stuff. And there's a whole ecosystem of visuals that you can purchase from third parties. You can write R, Python code in here. You can do ArcGIS maps. You can go nuts to do as fancy a report as you want. Now, it doesn't all have to be charts and bar charts. Some of these can be grids. If I wanted this just to be a grid, this one up here, make it a grid. Now, as I click on these, it filters. So if I click on Baldwin, I clicked on a pie chart down in visualization bottom left and said Baldwin. Over the window of time that I have, let's come over here to my filters. I can change the date. Check-ins, I want this to be something slightly different. Say we, whoops, scrolled away. Say we really are caring about the month of March for some reason. I'm going to click March. All this is March. This data flipped to March. This data flipped to March. And this grid up here only shows March, right? Everything I check, everything I click on one filters the data on all the others. So it's a very interactive experience. Now you could have this emailed automatically. You can export it to PDF. You can do whatever you want. It'll show up on a phone. As an example, if I go to view for this report, I can look at the mobile layout. This is what my mobile layout looks like. I can drag and drop things and make it look a little bit different on mobile than anything else. This thing is not represented on mobile. I'm going to drag this one down on mobile, make it a little bit bigger on mobile. Great. I'm going to go back to File. Whoops, not File. I'm going to get out of mobile layout. Whoops, I clicked it twice, I think. My bad. I am going to save. So I just click Control S. I'm going to go to Home. And over here, I'm going to click Publish. Click Select. I'm going to publish it to my workspace. It says, hey, we notice there's already a report in this place out in the cloud with that name. I want to replace it. So great. Let it replace. If I come in here, open it up on my phone, this is what it looks like on my phone. Now, I guess let me jump back, get rid of that. There is a separate Power BI app on the upper right. I'm on an iPhone, same on an Android. If I click that, it takes me into the Power BI app and it shows me all the reports that I have shared under this account. And I don't have many under Wildwood Workspaces. But I have quick access to any number of reports. I can star them. I can see, I'm going to show you the sales and marketing and some fancier ones, but that data is immediately available with me and it syncs up and I get the same interactivity. I'm touching it with my thumb and you just see the results. As I scroll, I see the same grid. I can share this data with anyone. Now the target audience is generally internal. If I, at ArchitectNow, the 20 or so of us that are all on the same Active Directory, I can share it with anyone and make it available. Now there's additional licensing considerations. We have to have Power Apps licenses or accounts that have an Office 365 and that ecosystem that have access to Power BI. So that still is a thing, but I can share it assuming those people do. There's my grid at the bottom. And if I click on the grid, I can see all the raw data. You can get as fancy as you want. I have another one here as a sample. This is a Microsoft demo report that gets a little more complex. There's a lot more to this report. It's got many pages. If I come back to, well, I guess I'll look at it there, I guess. If I look at different things, oops, sorry, my screen is flipping back and forth and doing a lot of things. I'm going to show you a different one I have up. Sorry, I'm going into a bunch here. This is the root of the document you're going to get. Here's another example of, I did not do this, I just found this one a long time ago and I like it. This is an example of a Power BI data warehouse dashboard. This is this data is interactive. Things change. It's actually published in Power BI. Some guy wrote it. Kudos to him. Show you can filter. He's got little tabs up here to filter. This is the type of data visualization that you could do. And everything in between. You can get as fancy or as not. You can publish these to various platforms. One thing I haven't shown much tonight, I know I'm running short on time, so there's a couple big things I want to hit on, is Teams. I don't know how many of you use Microsoft Teams, but it's a big thing in our world. It's very easy to add Power BI reports, Power Apps, all of the stuff we've talked about into Teams. Teams is one of Microsoft's first-class citizens. If I come in here, say add a tab to Teams, Power BI, it logs in, it says what you want to add. I'm going to say my workspace, I'm going to add my report. It'll automatically create a tab at the top of this team. We live inside of Teams generally. Teams is our communication hub. It has all of these things. I could be over here chatting and saying hello world with my people. I have files, wikis right inside a team. So we generate teams with like general and management. We can have OneNotes. We use OneNote shared a lot. So this is an example of a OneNote. No, this is a task board. I think we have a OneNote, one of these. Yes, notebook information. So this is a shared OneNote. Everyone in the team can collaborate on that. Then we have these reports. Power BI plugs right in. If I built a Power App and I wanted a Power App plugged right in here, say we wanted that check-in app that we had before, it's very easy for me to come here and just say I want a Power App. It logs me in, it knows who I am, searches, it says, do you want the check-in demo that you've worked on? Yes, add that here. We want to use that all the time. That Power App now runs natively right inside of Teams. I could have made it the tablet version so it used the screen more. We chose a mobile version for this particular thing for the mobile demo piece of it, but you can do both and mix and match. But I can do everything here. I never need to leave Microsoft Teams. I get my reports, I can trigger flows, I can do everything from Microsoft Teams, both in terms of the UI from apps and all of my data visualization. And it's all interactive here, just like it is in the desktop. So I'm actually still in Windows, but this visualization and interaction would work on Mac, it would work on Linux, it would work on anything. The only thing you need a Windows machine for, I might be preaching to the choir to people that all have Windows machines, but the only thing you would need it for is the designer, this full editing experience, all the capabilities of the visuals and the measures and the generated columns and the full cubes and BI modeling, business intelligence, data warehouse stuff that comes with Power BI. You need this particular thing to do. Another thing about Power BI, both on the desktop and Windows, is, or in other hosts, is you can comment, you can add questions on data. Add a new, I can come in here and have, say I see something in the data, there's all kinds of commenting that goes on. I could start a chat right here, and it stays with the report, right? So other people can collaborate with me on this data visualization. I can, if I'm an expert as to the source data and the algorithms that go into generating these visualizations, I can do that right here. The ability to collaborate is what's key across all of these tools. A couple more quick things. I'm going to open up to questions, get you guys some resources, and then share again the link. I don't know, Don, if you're on, can you actually grab the link to the sign up for the giveaways and repost that in the message here? I sent it to you in Teams earlier. But a couple other things that's worth pointing out, and I'm sure I missed a lot. So I'm happy to stay on and answer questions as long as you want. Even more importantly, I'm going to share my contact information. If any of you in your organizations have questions or think that anything I showed tonight might be of value to you, let me know. I'll give you my advice or tips or just point you in a direction that I think might be of benefit of something to read. But a couple other things that are kind of more on the, I wouldn't say power user side. The first one is common data service. I brought up connectors a bunch of times tonight. I told you that the Power BI uses connectors. Power Apps uses connectors. Power Automate uses connectors. The data sources are APIs. Some of them are traditional databases, SQL, Mongo, Cosmos, Oracle, Postgres, could be anything, MySQL. There's connectors for all of those. Microsoft with Dynamics has actually created what they call a common data service. And we use common data service quite frequently. Common data service is a set of pre-built entities. Come back over to here. It's a set of pre-built entities that are consistent across different kinds of apps. There are hundreds of them. What do they look like? They are things like account, address, appointment, contact. So accounts are businesses. Accounts have contacts that relate to them. Emails, letters. This is not, common data service is not a SQL Server database. It's a set of entities with a consistent structure. Now, these are just the default ones. There's a lot more than this, actually. If you want to see all, there's all kinds of stuff that goes into it. Microsoft Dynamics 365 is built on the common data service. So if you're a Dynamics customer and you create an account, it's writing to the common data service account. It has the same properties. If I click this, I can see what fields it has. It's an entity. It's got properties, the account name, the various things that go into it, address, the account number, all of these things, the aging, the do not allow faxes, Microsoft has standardized on these quote unquote entities. You can customize, when you sign up for common data service, you can customize your accounts or this particular entity if you want, and you can put in other fields. I wouldn't rename or delete fields because it'll break things like Dynamics if that's what they're using. You can go as far as they have a connector for SQL Server Management Studio where I can actually query. I'm querying my accounts, my dbo.account. It looks like SQL, but it's not. Oh, for some reason, I am no longer connected. if I came back in here and went to account and did a select star, whoops, select top, I can run queries and it'll execute that query. So if you're a SQL person, you could still use a SQL dialect, but it's not a SQL server. It's an API. It's a connector with common entities for most common business scenarios. We start with common data service on a lot of apps recently. We don't just do our own database design. We add new entities if we need them. But if we're building a quote unquote CRM, we have access to entities that already have everything that Microsoft already deemed necessary in Dynamics for a lot of those things. So common data service is a first class, if not the first class citizen for most of a lot of these Power Apps. So if I come in here and go into apps and create a new app, and I create a Canvas app, it will let me hit common data service and pick like an account. It'll generate all the Power Automate, the Power BI, all of those different tools will hit this common data service. That's the very first one they show. I want common data service over here. Phone layout. It will allow me to create a new CDS. Think of it like a pre-built SQL server with, I want an accounts table. So if you've ever sat down and hand coded or sat with a team and said, management doesn't want to buy a CRM, I need to build a CRM, I'm building you a CRM mobile app with 4 clicks. And there's no dummy data in there, but I know of. But if I created one, it would have, I don't know why that's all it put in here, but it has everything in a common data service I could drag and drop. And this will deploy to a phone and do everything else there. So common data service, hit me up for more details on that. I wish I'd spent more time tonight talking about it, but it is a first-class, real-time citizen of everything. Some of you wrote me prior to tonight and asked about DataFlex. Microsoft has a new thing they announced a week or so ago called DataFlex. What DataFlex is common data service. I included a link to it somewhere in this document. It is common data service licensed differently for use inside of Microsoft Teams. And that'll lead us to the final point of tonight, licensing. I'm sure I missed a lot of stuff I wanted to cover, but DataFlex is common data service without the licensing restriction of what it is today. And before I come back to DataFlex, let me switch gears and just go to pricing. How much does all this cost? If everything you saw tonight was like, this is great, I'm gonna go start doing something in my office, whatever it might be, and I'm gonna use Power Automate or Power Apps. Like I said, you actually build your tools. There's a document here, I'm just downloading it now. If this tells you anything about the pricing, there's a 26-page document. Infer what you will from that 26, the fact that it's 26 pages. But what you ultimately want to see is something like this. If you pay $10 a month for your Office 365 licenses today, for another $10, you can run single apps in a single business scenario for an individual employee. So if you have 20 employees, it's going to be another $200 a month to run Power Apps. But you're limited into the number that you get. You only get 2 or 3. If you want unlimited Power Apps, it's $40 a month per user. So I leave it to you to decide whether that's too much or too little. The benefit that $40 a month gets you, even for large organizations, is the flexibility of what it would take for the salaries, the benefits, the hardware, the office space for a large team of developers to spend their time building repeatable, internal line of business apps that could be done on this tool, right? That's what they're really going for. They're not saying go fire all your developers by any means, but what they're saying is if a developer can do in a day what would take them generally a year, that $40 a month is going to be of great value. So, and let the developers build the hard, complex stuff or the public-facing stuff. They come down and tell you in the bottom of this, you only get 2 apps in one portal if you're using the $10 a month plan. So If you do the $40, you get unlimited, and they go through all the different capacity and storage and stuff you get. The pricing for all of this is very nuanced. It isn't a one size fits all. What I'm looking at right here are Power Apps plans. That's the UI. If you want to use the AI builder and do image recognition, document scanning, things of that nature, there's a $500 per unit per month that you're doing for AI builder. If you want public access, I created a Power App earlier. It was a public facing portal. Looks like this, AN demo portal, Power Apps portals. This is actually a website. It's a public website I could share with you. It's got multiple pages. You can navigate around Kevin's products. It's got an image. This UI was all done as a Power App. I can do the forms design. I could do everything, all as a Power App. So I could publish this, and people, anonymous people out there on the internet can just hit this. That's a different price if you want the anonymous people thing. That's called a portal. If you want page view, it's $100 per month for 100,000 page views. That's a lot. And it basically becomes your CRM, or not your CRM, your web, your full managed, you edit your content. Somebody with low code capability manage your content on this type of thing. If you want authenticated users, it's $200 per month for 100 daily login sessions, or then it just scales up. So when I say it's nuanced, we have to sit down with every customer and decide, what are you trying to do? Well, if you want public users, it's going to be this. If you don't, it's going to be this. If you only want internal business apps, do you want one or more? Now, this is all Power Apps, and this gets stuff on their phones. When you get into Power Automate, some Office 365 licenses come with it, some do not. There's premium, there's not. When you get into Power BI, if you want people to look at reports, it's got its own pricing. Power BI is something like $10 a month. If you want to embed Power BI, you want the high-end version, starts at $5,000 a month, right? Is this too much or too little in your organization? It depends. I can make a very compelling argument. In most cases, people should be paying the $5,000 a month. If data in making decisions on that data and getting that data in the hands of the right people, whether it's customers or internal, is valuable, that isn't actually that much. If you're a smaller organization and that's cost prohibitive, there's creative ways you can do a lot with the per user pricing. So it's not a one size fits all. They have nice charts here that are graphs that tell you what's what and what people should do. But the pricing and all this, the one thing I didn't touch on tonight, and I am out of time, is Power Virtual Agent. If you are wanting to build the bot, there is a complete Power Virtual Agent that goes into building bots that you can type in. Refresh. You could plug in your own Teams bots. You can plug in chat bots for your customers. You can do all kinds of things. Guess what it uses? The same connectors that other people use as well. So if I wanted to come in and run one of these guys, I can edit it. I've got some sample bots. Teaches me some things I could type, I can run, and see how these work. I'm running out of time, so I'm not gonna go too far into the bots. But the bots actually use the same connectors. So they use, if somebody asks a question like, has there been a check-in at this location today, in our example that we've been using, we could have our bot automated to go back, hit that connector, hit that SQL Server database, sum some data and say, yes, there were 25 here today. That's what Power bots are. You can do scheduling, you could create things, you can, basically it's more of a freeform text integration, much like you'd see on Slack, or if it was a automated bot or a voice activated bot like an Amazon Alexa or Google, stuff like that would be inside of here. And somebody just posted, yes, there are some free plans for some of this, but you're going to be limited to yourself. It's more learn it. And some of the free plans, you don't get a lot of the ability to collaborate or share these things with other people. You can't build a Power App and share it with your team or publish it in Teams, things of that nature. Few final points, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. I've went a bit longer than I planned, but I always do. I talk a lot. I apologize for that. Notice one thing I didn't talk about tonight was data centers, hardware, processors, memory, any of that. Everything I showed you is low code and serverless. Now, obviously it's running somewhere in the cloud, but do you care where it's running? Microsoft handles all that for you. You spin up an app and publish it, share it with your people. They have access to it. They have access to it on their phones, all of that. If you were building a connector, you might care about where your data lives, but in terms of Power Platform, it leans more on the serverless side of things. Authentication and permissions are leveraged in M365, or you add a license to an M365 Active Directory account. You do not need to add these licenses as to your whole company. If you've got 1,000 employees that work at your company and you want to build a Power BI report, you can only buy report viewing capabilities for the one group of people that use it. It could be 10 people. So it's not an all or nothing thing. You don't turn it on as a company or turn it off as a company. You pick individuals or groups. If only people in shipping need a Power app, they can use the Power app. And empower end users. And I bring this up as our current scenario. Thus far in our world, in ArchitectNow's world and my team, we have been responsible for building the apps for others and publishing them. We had a customer driven by current events who had a very quick need to build internal workflow apps to manage COVID testing. Their businesses, they send nurses to large organizations around the country, and they do COVID testing at a massive scale, both for sporting groups, for colleges, other stuff. Their app is used internally. They're the only ones entering data, meaning their nurses and their medical staff. We were able to, in a matter of a week or two, build them a Power app and a Power automate most of that COVID testing. Could we have built it by hand? Would it maybe have looked a little more? We had a lot more flexibility if we could do our own CSS and data modeling. We were able to achieve the same goal much quicker, living in the constraints of Power apps in a 10th or 100th of the time and cost, and we're able to be very agile. They would go test one site, test 500 people, come back and say it all worked great, except could you do A, B, and C? We could affect A, B, and C in an hour, do another publish with the click of a button, their users refreshed, and boom, we're done. So that agility of being able to make changes, and what it does is it's an internal app. Even in this organization, their users and their contractors were the customers. So if you rely heavily on the MS ecosystem, the Microsoft Office 365, if you're using Outlook, if you're using Word, PowerPoint, Excel, OneDrive, the connectors for those are extremely mature. You can automate a massive amount of your business through that. We put here tens to thousands of users. It scales. Would it scale to Facebook level if we had 1 million active users a day? I doubt I would be using Power Apps for the UI at that scale. There's probably a limit. Workflows, it's allowed us to look a lot at a customer and say, man, I see what you're doing, and now all of a sudden Power Apps is front of mind for us. We say, or Power Automate, we can give us 2 days of work or a week of work, and we can help solve 5 of your 10 problems or whatever it might be. Throw something out there at very little cost. If it provides value, the cost is usually much less than the value in terms of time or effort expended. If you use it for 3 months and throw it away, so be it. We're able to solve temporary problems much quicker because the investment in doing it doesn't take as long as if you're not investing millions in getting some massive app out in the App Store. I know I ran out of time somewhat, but before I open up to questions and go back through, and if you've got questions, please type them in the chat, or if you want at this point, we can just take them audio. But info@architectnow.net, please shoot them over our way. Like I said at the very beginning, just to reiterate, it's not for everyone, but I think what I found is I think it's for more people than appreciate what these tools could be used for. We think that same way with our customers now, and our background is as hardcore developers. Do we use it on every project? No. Should we use it on more projects than we do? Yes. Are we starting to use this platform a lot more? Yes. So if you've got questions, I'm happy to answer them now. Happy to stay on. I'm happy to answer emails or hop on a Teams meeting in the coming days or weeks. If you've got somebody at your office that wants to know more about it and wasn't able to attend tonight, if they can watch the video or the recording of this, but I'm happy to do that as well, and to just do a custom session for the people that want. I'm becoming more of a fan, and ArchitectNow we weren't the very first people on this bandwagon. We're playing a little bit of catch up, which is fine, but that's kind of where we're at. We're trying to get as good at it as we can, as quickly as we can. So and share what we can to help people save money. The door prize, Don shared it up above. Like I said, it's a IoT. If you haven't already signed up for that, please do. I will pick that in the coming days. Not going to announce it now. I just wanted to remind you before I switch over to questions. Anything, what do we got? Anybody out there?
Well, Kevin, I was just going to say, I'm glad we reported this.
There was a lot.
And I'll post it out on YouTube, and I'll put a link in the Meetup post.
Okay. I guess one quick question from me to the group. Who here uses this platforms today? Doing these virtual things, I can't really survey the room and get a show of hands. So if you do, please put a +1 or something in the chat window. I'm kind of curious. Is it 0 people? Is it everybody here? Somewhere in the middle? Anybody build anything with Power Apps or platform? We got one. Obviously the Microsoft guy. So it doesn't look like, unless other people are just not finding the chat window, doesn't look like a significant amount. So my next question, put a +2 if you think that there is a value for you to do. How many of you looked at this and thought, wow, there's something that I do in my day job, or whether it's personal, side gig, whatever, that this might have been a benefit for? That's how I know if something's valuable. A lot more of you there. And that's kind of how I've approached this. There's more value to it. And those of you that know me know I lived through Light Switch and I lived through Silver. I've lived through a lot of things that Microsoft has. This is one of the bigger ones out there. We use Dynamics. If you haven't considered Dynamics, look into Dynamics. It's quite the tool, and it's 100% built on Power Apps and Power Flow right now, Power Automate. So every screen in Dynamics can be customized. As an admin, I can edit a screen if I like the account screen and it works for my business, but we do something slightly different where I need 2 more data points. I can edit the entity and I can add the columns within a couple clicks. Save, publish, I can have a dev environment, a production environment. The whole thing is all Power Platform, which people come to us and say, this is my need. And there's times we say, buy Dynamics, and we'll do 2 weeks customization and you're off to the races. If I had to do that 5 years ago, they would have paid me for 2 years and a team of 10 people to build this massive thing. Now it could be, a couple days or a week or 2, which is a selling point for next month's meeting. Don't charge by the hour. Any other thoughts, comments?
Yeah, so this is Don. I got a little bit of an echo, Kevin, right after you.
That's no problem.
So what I've been, reading material and watching videos, this is a really interesting platform. And what became clear to me is not just the value of the features, but the value of what us normal developers now don't have to spend our time doing. If you really think about all the things that you may have to spend your time with maintaining stuff that doesn't really serve a massive long-term value, you can buy back your time by moving to some of these new platforms. And so with that time, what could you be reinvesting in to put your business or your customers in a better position? There's technology is evolving way faster than anyone can keep up with. And so this is an opportunity to, kind of harden some things that you don't have to deal with anymore. Let Power Platform manage it for you, and you go spend time doing something else like, AI or, ArcGIS data or, whatever the sort of next thing is. While not continuously trying to add more plates to keep spinning. So that's kind of my 2 cents. And when we talk about customers who are looking into these types of platforms, we know the beginning of this story really, really well, where they need something, minute that could one day be really interesting, where the year 2 implementation of this is really complicated, data warehousing, analytics, and AI modeling, and all these things that they're just not ready for. But if we blow all their money on just the MVP, they'll never get to the year 2 feature sets.
And it's also not an all or nothing thing. There's customers where year 1 had to be something that we custom wrote. There was whatever technical reasons we needed to not build pieces of it on the Power Platform. But we built those pieces in such a way. How many of us have built a front-end website and then had to go back and also built a secure admin set of tooling for an administrator to manage some settings or get a report of the data? But the administrator usage is light, it's small, might be 5 or 6 people, some managers get some reports out of it. We're able to do those back-end things in Power Platform very quickly. We can knock those out. Those are just a give me now. Give us a couple days. What reports do you need? And what, we'll throw up a Power App for you 5 people. We'll invest the rest of our focus time on your compelling, rich, dynamic front-end website that, competes with Airbnb or whatever the case may be. So the admin thing doesn't eat up half your time. And I've spent as much or more time on apps in my past that were back-end tools for 10 people than I ever spent on the front-end stuff that mattered to the end user.
Yeah, and same goes for reporting. That, I try to actively discourage customers from trying to pay us to write reports for them, because the long-term value of those reports is only about 18 months. After that, their business is transformed. They're asking new questions, and the 5 or 10 grand it costs us to build them that sort of medium complexity report doesn't have the long-term ROI. So I'd rather build them the self-service tooling to be able to change the reports every day of the week if they want.
So my challenge to everybody on here, if you've done these tools, if you use these tools, come back to this meetup or other meetups and share more detail. Pick one and go into it. I mean, spread the knowledge, right? We covered a lot tonight at a high level. More could be done at any individual product. If you haven't, I've included in that document, if you signed up, if you want the document, please sign up at the link that Don shared and we'll get that out. But one of the things that you have, if you want to know more, we include all kinds of links, demos, everything we have, we've got pages of it. One of them I'll leave you with, Microsoft Learn and all the certifications and exams that go into this. Microsoft has done a great job on this platform. This is not just something they threw out here on the side and don't support. You can learn more about these tools by watching these videos on learn.microsoft.com here, taking the exams, getting certifications. If you've not been to learn.microsoft.com, I'm logged in as a different account than my day job, but I can come in here and pick Power BI, get started building with Power BI, introduction to the Power Platform. It'll walk you through everything, the videos here, the quality, the process. You actually earn experience points for those of you that in your spare time, like me or Clint Edmondson, who's now playing D&D without me right now. If you're a D&D player, you can be a 10th level monk in the Power Platform space pretty quickly. And it's actually, they're bite size. They're all 5-10 minutes, but they add up and they walk you down a very good path and teach you a lot of stuff. So I'm a big fan of it. Get certified. Watch even the intro ones, if that's what you just want to learn a little bit more about these things. They teach you quite a bit of stuff. Microsoft has not gotten enough credit for learn.microsoft.com in the last couple of years. That's been a huge focus of theirs that has gone, in my world, somewhat unnoticed. Yeah. Somebody just asked a question. Let me skip back to it. I know I'm sharing my screen. In LightSwitch, I remember that the data model often had to have a specific form keys. Some, yes. In some ways, it's much better. In some ways, for example, a good example of this is the demo app that we showed today. So his question related to, does it benefit you or hurt you to have specific data model structures? We built the demo app today that we're using this row ID here, I mean, we created a simple table. It could have been as complex as we wanted, many tables. This is the simplest Power App we've probably ever built, is the one we did today. But when we started, I'm a Mongo guy. I'm a distributed database guy. I'm a NoSQL guy. So my GUIDs anymore, or my IDs are GUIDs. I don't do auto number. That just hasn't been a thing for me or any of my team. I don't remember anything that we've done that had an auto number for primary key. But the way the connector API works for triggering Power Automate, it needed your unique ID to be somehow sequential. What they do is they pull every second your SQL database behind the scenes, and they look for a larger number in the ID. And if they see one, that causes the trigger that triggers all the flow. So if they see a bunch, they trigger it X number of times. Took us a while to figure that out. So that's one quick example. I'm sure there's more, but to answer your question, this platform does have its own nuances in how you design data. So the answer is yes. Not sure they're the same issues, but similar things that you have to be aware of. Doing certain things one way makes your life a bit easier. Doing things another, you may run into issues.
And maybe Michael Kermit can jump in if I'm saying this wrong, but the Power Query language seems to be the current sort of bottleneck for that, and there is definitely a roadmap for improving that. But if you want to get sort of real deep in the weeds of, what type of aggregation and data querying can you do in the Power Platform, that's the first place I would start reading more deeply.
Anything else before I sign off and say, please reach out if you have questions? Like I said, we knew we were going to run through a light switch. We knew tonight's topic might be a little bit outside the norm for the .NET meetup, but on the flip side, we're .NET developers at heart. And once we started to appreciate what this does, this is the kind of topic that we think meetups like this needs to see. Everything doesn't, if you've got a hammer, everything's not a nail. Sometimes you need to look around at other tools and see how they might fit into your ecosystem. Your peers will appreciate it. Your management will appreciate it. Your end users will appreciate it. The more value you can provide is all that matters. What matters isn't that you get to use the same tool every day of your life. The goal is that we do more and better quicker.
Kevin, this is Scott. It was a great session. Thanks for bringing it tonight.
No problem.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Chau.
Oh, no problem. Like I said, one final thing. There's contact information. If not, this will all be shared. You'll get to see it again. ArchitectNow. Follow me on Twitter. If anything we said tonight came across as complete BS and you know better, I definitely want to know that too, because that's how we learn. So don't hold back. The good and the bad and the ugly. And it's all very cool. And I look forward to, and definitely look forward to seeing what's going on next month, where they say don't bill by the hour. So I appreciate everybody on here. We're going to sign off. Have a good night, and thanks for staying late with us, later than planned. So
Well, thanks, everyone. See you next month.
Well, if you win, one final thing on the giveaways. I'm going to pick 4 people probably tomorrow. I will email you, so make sure you use a valid email. Don't use some fake thing, or I'll never be able to get a hold of you. If you win, what I just ask is you share your address with me, and I will send these things out. It'll take about a week. So I appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
See ya.